You were 7, maybe 8, and someone in your house was crying, not you. Someone bigger than you. Someone who was supposed to be the one holding things together. And instead of doing what most kids that age do, which is freeze or panic or go find another adult, you walked over, you sat down next to them, and you said something like, "It's going to be okay." And here's the thing, you meant it. You weren't performing. You weren't mimicking something you saw on TV. You genuinely believed that it was your job in that moment to make this person feel better. You were a child, carrying the emotional weight of someone else's world, and it felt normal. It felt like just what you did. If that sounds familiar, this is going to hit different, because what happened to you has a name, and understanding it might quietly change how you see every relationship you've ever had. Psychologists call it parentification. It's what happens when the roles in a family get flipped, when the child becomes the caretaker, the listener, the mediator, the one who reads the room before anyone else even notices the room has shifted. And it doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it's not abuse. Sometimes it's not neglect in the way most people picture it. Sometimes it's just a parent who was overwhelmed, a household that was stretched too thin, a situation where someone had to step up and you were the one who did. But here's what most people don't talk about. The kids who grow up this way, they don't look broken. They look incredible. They're the ones everyone calls mature for their age. The ones teachers praise for being so responsible. The ones friends turn to first when something goes wrong. And that's the cruel trick of it, because the world rewards you for the very thing that was taken from you. Let me explain what actually happens in the brain when this kicks in too early. Your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for planning, decision-making, emotional regulation, it doesn't fully develop until your mid-20s. That's not opinion, that's neuroscience. But when a child is placed in a caregiving role repeatedly, the brain starts prioritizing the development of certain neural pathways over others. You get really, really good at reading facial expressions, at detecting shifts in tone, at anticipating what someone needs before they even say it. Your amygdala, the brain's threat detection system, becomes hypersensitive. Not because you're anxious by nature, but because you had to be vigilant. Your survival depended on knowing the emotional temperature of the room at all times. And I think that's the part most people miss. This isn't a personality trait, it's an adaptation. Your nervous system learned very early that the safest thing you could do was to become useful, indispensable. The person who never needs anything, because needing something meant being a burden, and being a burden meant risking the one thing you couldn't afford, to lose. There was a study out of the University of Minnesota, part of a long-running research project on attachment, that followed children from birth into adulthood. And what they found was striking. Kids who had been parentified didn't just carry emotional patterns into adulthood. They carried a specific kind of loneliness, a loneliness that looks from the outside like independence, like strength, but from the inside feels like standing on the other side of glass, watching people connect in ways that feel easy for everyone else, but somehow impossible for you. And here's where it gets complicated, because you did develop real skills. The empathy you have, it's real. The ability to hold space for someone, to know exactly what to say, to stay calm when everything around you is falling apart, that's real. You weren't faking it then, and you're not faking it now. But the cost of developing those skills at that age is that you never learned how to receive. You learned how to give. You learned how to show up. You learned how to be the anchor. But the idea of someone else holding you, that feels foreign, almost dangerous. You might notice it in small ways. Someone asks how you're doing, and your first instinct is to say, "I'm fine," even when you're not, because the honest answer feels like too much. Or you find yourself in relationships where you're always the strong one, always the fixer, and when someone tries to take care of you, there's this strange discomfort, almost like guilt, like you're doing something wrong by letting someone else carry the weight. That guilt has a source, and it's not rational. It's the echo of a child who learned that their value was tied to their usefulness. That love wasn't something you just received, it was something you earned, over and over, every single day. Let me be honest here. This one surprised me too, because when you look at the research on attachment styles, parentified children don't always fall neatly into one category. Some become anxiously attached, always scanning for signs that they're about to be abandoned. Some become avoidantly attached, keeping people at a comfortable distance because closeness feels like a setup for responsibility. And some, and this might be the most heartbreaking pattern, develop what's called a disorganized attachment style. They want connection desperately, but the very act of getting close triggers an old alarm system that says closeness equals obligation. equals losing yourself, equals becoming responsible for another person's entire emotional world all over again. And so they push and pull. They love hard and then disappear. They build walls and then wonder why they feel so alone behind them. There's something else that doesn't get enough attention: the grief. Because when you grow up too fast, you lose something you can never fully get back. You lose the experience of being a child who is simply held, protected, free to be messy and loud and selfish in the way that children are supposed to be selfish, not because they don't care, but because they haven't yet learned to carry anyone else's pain. That's a loss, a real one, and most people who went through this have never been given permission to grieve it. Because how do you grieve something you never had? How do you mourn a childhood you can barely imagine? Especially when the world keeps telling you that you turned out fine, that you're so put together, that you're the one everyone can count on. Here's what I want you to sit with. The hyper-independence you developed, it was brilliant. It kept you safe. It made you capable in ways that most people your age weren't, and honestly, in ways that many adults still aren't. Your brain did exactly what it needed to do to get you through. That's not a flaw. That's not damage. That's your nervous system being incredibly, almost heartbreakingly good at its job. But you're not in that house anymore. You're not 7. The emergency is over, and the hardest thing, maybe the bravest thing you'll ever do is let your body know that. It's learning to pause before you fix, learning to say, I'm actually not okay, and letting the silence that follows exist without rushing to fill it. It's tolerating the discomfort of being helped without interpreting it as weakness. It's recognizing that the voice inside you that says, I should be able to handle this alone, isn't wisdom, it's a wound. Still speaking in the language of a child who had no other option. You don't have to unlearn everything. You don't have to become someone who can't hold space for others. That part of you is beautiful, and it's real, and it's yours. But you get to also become someone who can be held, someone who doesn't have to earn the right to rest, someone who can let a moment be soft without scanning for what might go wrong inside it. And I think that's the part that changes things. Not the awareness, not even the science, but the quiet, almost radical permission to finally be the one who is taken care of. To let the grown-up you've been since you were small be small for a moment. Not because you're broken, but because you always deserve that, and it's not too late to feel it. If this reached something in you, I'd love to hear about it. Not the polished version, the real one. What did growing up too fast cost you? And what are you learning to reclaim? Leave that in the comments. This is a space where being honest is the whole point.